What's Tennessee's record going to be this year? A lot of bubbling momentum around this program, at least if you take my word for it. Well, here's what you need to know about Tennessee this year. Their over-under win total has been interesting at FanDuel. It was 8.5, then it shot up to 9.5. Now it's come back down to 8.5. Now, of course, you got to lay a lot more to bet that over than you do the under. It's heavily juiced to the over. Seventh best odds to win the SEC. 12th best odds to win the whole thing, the college football playoff. So it's a deep conference, at least in preseason terms, in the SEC this year. Let's talk about what we think we know. I think I know these things about Tennessee. I think I know the offense will be much closer to the 2022 version than last year's version. I expect the passing game to scale significantly. They had the best passing game in the country, best points per game in the country in 2022. Last year, points per game, they were tied for 35th. Yeah, that's going up. Nico Iamaleava, don't need to have seen him start a whole year to know he's a stud, at least enough to make that number go up significantly. I think their run game will always be good under Josh Heupel. One of the great misnomers about Josh Heupel is it's just this shot offense. It's just this like air raid, 4 verts every play, Mike Leach passing off. It's not that. It's not that. They run the ball, consistently run the ball. Got one of the best rushing games in the country every year, and yet people get amnesia and they totally forget about that. The second thing I think I know about Tennessee, James Pierce on the edge for them, probably one of the best players in the country, preseason All-American, maybe the top edge player in America this year. And at the very least, he's up there and vying for that. And there are probably some impact players on this team that are on the defensive side that you wouldn't expect because everyone thinks offense when they think Tennessee. One of the big questions we have about this team is about the other side, opposite James Pierce. We'll talk about that in a second. A third thing I think I know is this program has major scale-up energy about it right now, and that doesn't necessarily impact their win-loss record. What it does is it puts them in position to where if they win 10 or 11 games, if they have a great year, if they have another special year like they did year before last, they could really be off to the races. I think they already are. I think this year's result will just further bolster that. But I know a lot of you aren't as bullish on Tennessee as I am. So a lot of you have to see it to believe it. That's fine. Here's what I want to know. I want to know how they're going to backfill losing all these pieces in the secondary. They lost between 150 and 200 starts in the secondary last year. To this year, they lost 5 of 6 guys back there. And they also lost Jordan Thomas early in fall camp. And he was probably running as the one at nickel for them. So not only are they replacing a lot of guys who left from last year, they've already had injury strike that group this year. That's the first thing, because there's a big difference in having to, be first to 40 every week because you've got the same problems this year that LSU's secondary had last year. There's a big difference between that and not being a great pass defense, but being plenty serviceable enough. Are they going to be the former or the latter? Another thing that I want to know, how many difference makers are on this team? How many game breakers are on this team? We look past quarterback for this because every quarterback is going to directly impact the game in a big way, one way or the other. Brew McCoy is still on this team. Squirrel White's still on this team. They went and got Brazel, the transfer wide receiver from Tulane. Arian Carter, linebacker. Elijah Herring, linebacker. There are a lot of guys who are former big names in recruiting, very talented. Do we have any game breakers? Because the third thing that I want to know is, it kind of bleeds into the second thing. I know I've got James Pierce. I know he fits this description. Do I have anyone on the opposite side of that defensive line that can do that? Or is all the attention on him? All right, now the third thing I want to know. Nico Iamaleava physically has all the traits you need. Josh Heupel and his staff fully believe in him. There's always an adjustment period in this game, especially if you're in a Big Ten or an SEC environment where you got a lot of really highly paid coaches, a lot of deep coaching staffs, a lot of analysts off the field with a lot of time on their hands, and they're just focused on you. And if you're a first-year starter, you're making your first go-around, the SEC, a lot of really, really good football minds are singularly focused on stopping you. And sometimes they succeed, which begs the question, how good is Nico Iamaleava at adjusting to the league's adjustments? It's no different than a big league hitter when he comes up and he starts hot, and then all of a sudden they figure out, wow, off speed, low and in, he can't handle for some reason. Either yanks it foul or he's over the top of it. So let's just pepper him with that until he shows that he can adjust. Now, sometimes they do adjust. Hands inside the ball, middle away, we're good. Sometimes they don't adjust. And sometimes you're back down in AAA after you were on the cover of Sports Illustrated the prior month and you're like, what happened? Sometimes that happens with quarterbacks as well. So that's the great unknown with any guy who gets his first chance to start. The coaching staff here, really interesting, really dangerous and underrated coaching staff. So Heupel, the model has graded as a top 25 head coach, but Heupel is a 4.5-star offensive coordinator. If you just look at him as an offensive coordinator, he's right up there with some of the best in the country. He has got an insanely good offensive support staff. It is top 5 in the country. The defensive support staff is top half of the SEC. Now, Tim Banks is the defensive coordinator there. Model has him graded low. If you said there's a weakness on the coaching staff, relatively speaking, it would be the defensive coordinator position, but he had a really good 2023. His 2023, if he were to duplicate that again, you're no longer using that terminology about him. This is not my opinion, by the way, I'm sharing. This is model output. This thing's blind. It has no emotion. It doesn't even know where Knoxville, Tennessee is. This is a top 15 staff, and it's a top 15 recruiting staff. The 1 through 11 especially, so the traditional on-field guys, that is top 15 in the country and top 15 recruiting in the country. That's very underrated. People don't think about Tennessee like that. There's some coaching staffs out there that you guys would rank above them that in reality do not belong above them. And then if you pop another 10 or 11 win season and you also get to backload with the new NCAA coaching rules with off the field guys all of a sudden being on the field, it's only going to get deeper. What about the schedule here? It's one of the best draws, which is ironic because they play Alabama and Georgia, but it's still one of the best draws. So follow me here. They only play 3 teams in the JP poll top 25. Now, they are really good teams. They go to Oklahoma in week 4. It's one of my circle games. I can't wait for that one. It's Josh Heupel going back to Norman, Tennessee's first time on the road this year in a true road environment. It's Oklahoma's first SEC game, I think. So that one's going to be really good. But look at week 2. I was on Pack Pride with those guys on their radio show last night. We spent a fair amount of time talking about this game. Tennessee folks, SEC folks do not focus on that week 2 game. That is like one of 2 Super Bowls for NC State this year. They're looking at that one in Charlotte. That's a neutral site game against Tennessee. And they're looking at the Clemson game. And they think if they can split there, they got a pretty reasonable shot of challenging for an ACC championship appearance. So don't catch yourself in ambush mode there. Tennessee will be well represented over there. It won't be like some hostile environment, no more so than it'll be for NC State. But that is not one to just look at and go, dub, and then move on. This is not the NC State team to think that way, especially because the wide receiver core they have over there, they believe, is the best they've had in a long time. They got a very, very veteran transfer quarterback, and your secondary is your biggest question mark right now. So be very careful with that NC State game. I feel like we just broke the game down. They go to Oklahoma in week 4 again. Like I said, that is one of my circle games of the year. Best case record for Tennessee this year, 11-1. If everything comes together for them, there is absolutely an 11-1 on this slate. The worst case, I think, is 7-5. So what do we predict? I was way between 9-3 and 10-2. Because I have a first-year starter at quarterback, questions in the secondary, and I do play at Georgia, and I do play Alabama, and I do play Florida at home. I've got at Oklahoma. I've got that weird neutral site game there. I think there's enough uncertainty for me to predict 9-3. It is very, very close to 10-2, and 10-2 has them in the playoff. There's a world where 9-3 has Tennessee in the playoff, so this is very much on the precipice, sort of a seesaw, 9-3, 10-2 for me. I've got them 14th in the preseason JP poll. So everything's on the table for Tennessee. 11-1 wouldn't shock me. 10-2, 9-3, that's kind of where I would predict their record.